In this video we'll show you how we can machine certain areas of the imported file here. So the first thing we need to do is set up where we want our 0 to be. So at the moment it's down in this bottom left hand corner somewhere, so we'll change that so that it's at the midpoint in X and Y and the maximum in Z. It's always best to have the top of the file as the Z0 so that the dimensions in Z are measured negative into the workpiece. Okay, so that's the file there, and we need to machine just these pads here. Now if we wanted to machine those and select faces, what would happen is if we selected that face, that would give us an enclosed shape which wouldn't be what we wanted to machine. So what we'll do is we'll pick edges and create a sketch made up of edges. So to do that, we move the mouse over the model, and we can rotate the model around so that we can see the edges that are being selected. So that's the first edge there. Then we hold down the control key to select the other edges there, and then we'll just zoom out and rotate round and then pan across and then select these other edges here again by just holding down the control key there. Okay, so having selected the edges, we right click the mouse and choose make to sketch. So in the objects window here we now have a sketch of that the part that we need to machine. So what you'll notice is obviously there's a gap between the two parts of that sketch, so we need to close that off. So the easiest way to do that is just to modify one of the lines which go to make up that sketch. So if we click on sketch here and then go into the properties window and select reorder, then we can see the order of the lines. So we right click on sketch and then we can see the order in which those lines are being created. Okay, so that's the line, that's the arc, and that's the line. And then over here that's the line, that's the arc, and that's the line. So if we wanted to modify the line just over here such that it meets the end of the line there. So if we click on that line there, and under the properties window here it gives us a start point in X and Y. So if we just use Control C to copy that X position, and then we go to the end line there and we go to the X value there and do Control V to paste, what that does is that it modifies the end of that line such that it's coincident with the start point of the other line. So we've now got a sketch which is going right the way round there. So to machine that, we're just going to use a profile command, but obviously we need to get rid of this other material here. So what we'll need to do is we'll need to do that in a couple of passes, and we'll need to use the finishing allowance sequence to do that. So we've got that sketch there, so if we right click and say we want a new profile operation, now to start with we're not sure of the direction, so we'll keep that on the side as outside or left. We'll climb mill, and because we're using a we want to clear out some of that area, we'll use an offset extra finishing offset extra, so that will just add material on so that it will in effect produce a roughing type path on that profile. We set up the tool we want to use. We will be using a pattern later on, but to start with we're not going to. We don't need to have it using a surface because we're not doing any 3D machining as such. we set up the clearance plane, the work surface and the depth and so on, and the number of step downs that we want. So if those values are all okay, we can just click OK to accept that. So what that does is that it tries to machine the sketch, but it's offset by an amount of 6mm, so this is quite a small part, as you can see, and that should now have cleared out that area. But if you need to change that in any way, make it bigger or smaller, you can change the size of the tool, you can change the offset. Okay, so that's done the roughing of that. We could now do another operation on there. So if we right click on sketch 1 and say a new profile operation, this time we'll leave just 1mm on there, and we'll use that same tool and we'll use the same step downs. So that's gone into the shape now, but it's still left 1mm on there for finishing, because that 6mm tool won't quite clear up into the corners there. So we now do another pass, which will be the finishing. So we say new profile operation. We're not going to use any offset there, so it's going to machine right to the part. We'll use the smaller cutter, which will get into the corner rads, and we don't need to use a step down because this is just a finishing pass. Okay, so that's machined the 3 passes on there. We could change the size of the tool, we can change our offsets, etc, etc. But what we need to do would be to make those 3 toolpaths work on the other parts of the shape here. So we can use the dimension command to find out how far away these parts are, or we could read it off the drawing. So if we want to dimension it, if we just go back into the XY view, and then we'll use the dimension command. Okay, so let's just zoom in on there, and we'll say geometry dimensioning, and we'll make sure that we're dimensioning in just the x-axis, because we're not worried about anything else. And the snap mode needs to be set to endpoint, but make sure that your selection filter here includes points and lines. Okay, so now we can click here and click on there, so that's snapped onto those 2 entities, so we know the offset between those features is 49mm. So now if we go into the milling tab, we'll set up a pattern. So we'll have a total number of copies will be 4, the X shift will be 4, and the X shift will be 49mm, and we won't have any offset in the opposite side. So that's just machining it 4 instances 49mm apart in the x-axis. So that's just set up a pattern for repeat machining. Now we can apply that pattern to these operations that we created previously. So we go into profile here, so now we'll say use pattern 1, okay, and okay, we can see how that's machined that one there. Now we can do the same thing here, pattern 1. So that's the second semi-roughing, and now we use the same thing here for the finishing. Okay, so that's machined those 4 parts, each one offset by the amount of the repeat pattern operation that we set up. Okay, so if we now go back into the plan view, we can see that that machining and process needs to be repeated along the bottom here, and we'll cover that in our next video.